Surely Amari Cooper's not going to do that again, right? Right? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans versus Browns Saturday afternoon, getting Super Wildcard Weekend started. Texans in the playoffs, hosting the Browns, who they played just a few weeks ago. And if you'll remember, in that game, and I know some of you have blocked it out of your memories, Amari Cooper took the mantle from T.Y. Hilton as the decimator, dominator, slicer, dicer, destroyer, crusher, annihilator of Texans defenses as he was on his way to a record-setting day and ultimately set the record for most receiving yards against the Texans in one game. 265 yards to go along with 2 touchdowns in that matchup. It was the nightmare on Kirby Street. How do you keep it from being a new nightmare on Saturday? Let's break it down. Let's dive into it. Let's talk a little bit about how the Texans can go about maybe, just maybe, slowing Amari Cooper down enough so that they can beat the Cleveland Browns. So there's good and bad about the chances for the Texans to take care of Amari Cooper and slow him down. I'll start with the good, and then we'll get to the bad, which is actually kind of ugly. So the good part is Steven Nelson, Derek Stingley, healthy when this game gets here on Saturday. 21, 24, they're good to go when this game gets here on Saturday. That's the biggest element because in the game, Steven Nelson got dinged up a little bit. You had Kadar Holman on Amari Cooper at one point. You had D'Angelo Ross on Amari Cooper at one point. And Cooper took care of business against those guys. I have a lot more faith, obviously, in Steven Nelson and Derek Stingley than I do anybody else to slow down Amari Cooper when the opportunity presents itself. So those are the first aspects of slowing down Amari Cooper. The next aspect is this secondary, the way it's constructed, has been playing together for a couple of weeks now. Remember, Jimmy Ward started that game. Jimmy Ward didn't finish that game, though, for the Texans. So this secondary, the way it's put together, the way it's constructed, Stingley and Nelson and Petrie and DeAndre Houston Carson, they've been playing together here for a couple of weeks now. So they got a little bit of groove. Communication is something that Jalen Petrie talked about this week that is better between those 4 guys in the back end and the secondary as a whole. They've put it together over the past few weeks. So that is something that's a positive as well in slowing down Amari Cooper. One more element about that, Jalen Petrie himself, one of the guys that was not playing well in coverage, not doing really anything well for a good portion of the season. He's played better. It's still not great. It's still not really good, but he's played better in recent weeks. So I like the secondary's chances to bounce back as a whole, and certainly with the matchups of Nelson and Derek Stingley on Amari Cooper, I like their chances to at least slow him down. Here's another part about Amari Cooper and the situation that the Texans are facing on Saturday. That's the last time he played football. Amari Cooper hasn't played football in a couple of weeks now. Now, he missed that next game for the Browns due to a heel injury. Well, that was a Thursday night football game. And then the following week, the Browns had clinched their playoff spot. They were locked in. They couldn't improve their playoff lie at all, so Amari Cooper didn't play. He's still on the injury report with that heel injury being a designation. There's a rest designation next to him, though, but he hasn't played football in a couple of weeks. So maybe there's some rust that Amari Cooper needs to knock off. It didn't take him any time last time to get things going against the Texans right off the bat, but maybe there's some rust that he needs to knock off. And if that heel continues to bother him, if that heel is something that is an issue in this game, it might take his ability down a notch, and his top end might not be, set a record and destroy the Houston Texans. That's another element that I think is in the good category for this matchup. The final one, I felt like the defensive line was actually pretty close to Flacco a couple of different times. So they were still close to Flacco, to getting him, to sacking him, to putting some pressure on him. And when you watch this game, the Browns and the Texans played the first time, when Flacco gets out of the pocket, it's not nearly as good or comfortable from him when he's throwing the football. Not to say that he's some immobile statue. He's made some plays on the run over the course of this season, but Flacco out of the pocket, flushed out of the pocket, he's not nearly as good. And the Texans almost got home a handful of times. If you remember, there was one play over on the sideline that Amari Cooper toe tapped. He was in. Joe Flacco threw that with like 3 Texans hanging off of him. Okay, so they almost got to Flacco a little bit. I would hope and almost expect Jonathan Gennard, Will Anderson, Sheldon Rankins, Malik Collins, and everybody else from the backup standpoint to be able to get home for the Texans and at least disrupt Flacco and some of the timing that he's been able to put together with Amari Cooper. Because, again, it was very much an easy affair for Amari Cooper. So on time, that's bad for the Texans. Off schedule, that's really good for the Texans. So those are all the good elements that I like about this matchup. Now, let's get to the bad elements of this matchup. I talked about Derek Stingley. I talked about Steven Nelson, both being healthy in this matchup. I went back and looked at all the times that Amari Cooper was targeted throughout this game, from incompletes to interception that Flacco threw at one point, to catches, to pass breakups. And I went through, and Amari Cooper got everybody. He beat everybody at some point. He beat Kadar Holman. He beat D'Angelo Ross. He split Steven Nelson and Jimmy Ward on that first big play. He got Derek Stingley a couple times, including for a touchdown. He beat linebackers at different portions. He beat zone coverage. He beat man coverage. He shook loose on Steven Nelson a time or two. Like, Amari Cooper got everybody. I, in fact, watched every snap, and these are the defenders on Amari Cooper in the snaps where the ball went to Amari Cooper or headed his direction. So Steven Nelson, Jimmy Ward on that first big one down the middle, the first play of the game. Kadar Holman got for 22 yards. D'Angelo Ross on the 75-yard touchdown. Desmond King had a pass breakup, read it perfectly, knocked it away from Amari Cooper. Desmond King and Derek Stingley. King kind of passed him off to Stingley. Stingley, I don't know if he was supposed to end up with him. That was 23 yards for Amari Cooper. And then Derek Stingley was on Cooper twice at the end of the first half. Flacco was just trying to get it into the end zone. So these aren't like great Stingley plays. One was an incomplete, one was an interception. But again, the Browns were just trying to get the ball into the end zone. They didn't have enough time to run anything else besides throwing it into the end zone. So not as impressive. It was a third down where Steven Nelson gave him too much room and just kind of didn't even move when he got shook. So shake and bake by Amari Cooper. Derek Stingley let it go to Denzel Perryman, who was just lost in coverage, and Cooper got going on that one. The play that I talked about over on the sideline, Steven Nelson bails out. DeAndre Houston Carson comes in, tries to make the play. It's almost a pass breakup, but it's the Cooper toe touch over on the sideline for 13 yards. Nelson and DeAndre Houston Carson team up to force an incompletion. There was a penalty on the play, so that one didn't count. Stingley, he allowed the touchdown, a 9-yard touchdown pass. He played 9 yards off of Amari Cooper, and he just never caught up to Cooper once Cooper made his move. He mossed Steven Nelson at one point where he just kind of ripped the ball away from him over the top. He just ran by Desmond King. I don't know if King lost coverage or wasn't supposed to be covering him, but he just ran by Desmond King in the red zone and ran right past him for a catch for a few yards. He had the 2-point conversion, and that was in front of Denzel Perryman and Adrian Amos. He got Steven Nelson at one point, and then the final play was that Steven Nelson was an incomplete, and then the final play was Derek Stingley for 12 yards. And that was him and Stingley one-on-one, and Amari Cooper just boop, boom. The Steven Nelson, when he tried to hit a double move on Nelson didn't bite, and Flacco just kind of threw it away. So, look, that was 17 plays I just ran through, and it was a variety of people in a variety of ways that Amari Cooper got the Texans. So that's the scary part for me about him, is he got anybody and everybody in that matchup. He took care of the best corner on the team, the second best corner on the team, the backup corners on the team. He got safeties. He got zone coverage. Like, he had success in every way that you could have success against the Texans. That's what's scary about it. You know, it's also scary. I talked about I expect the pass rush to get home. Feels like all those guys are dinged up, banged up a little bit. So if they can't get home, if they miss some time in the game, they leave the game, they're not close to 100%. I don't know. You can play Will Anderson more than a handful of snaps and get what you need out of him. If they can't get home to Flacco, Flacco's going to have all day, and Cooper's going to go out there and take care of business and do this to the Texans once again. And here's the biggest thing. I don't know that Stefanski and the Browns have to rely on Amari Cooper as much as they did. They have to look at what happened last week and think they can run the football. Not as good as the Colts did. They don't have Jonathan Taylor, but they have to think they're going to be able to run the football. And then David Njoku got loose a few times in this game. He's one of the best tight ends in football this year. He's a freaky athlete. He's very good up the seam, and the Texans have had trouble covering tight ends over the course of this season. So the scary part is Cooper can beat anybody. Doesn't matter how healthy they are. They may not need to rely as much on Amari Cooper, and the pass rush may not be able to get home as much as you want it. But I do feel like going out on a limb here. He ain't setting another record. But you can't let him get after you like T.Y. Hilton constantly did against the Houston Texans. T.Y. Hilton, it felt like once he emerged as that Texans killer, he was good for over 100 yards and a score basically every time he lined up against the Texans. Amari Cooper can't become that guy right in front of you. Can't dominate this game, or you've got no shot. This is supposed to be a low-scoring affair. You look at what the Browns defense does. You look at what the Texans defense wants to do. This should be a low-scoring game. And if Cooper's having a big day, then the Browns are going to march right through the Texans, and they're going to head into the next round of the playoffs, and we're all going to be looking around like, why couldn't they stop Amari Cooper? They had a bunch of time to figure this thing out. I've got faith that Miko Ryans and his defense will have stuff figured out for Amari Cooper. He won't get shut down, but my goodness, he's not going to have that type of day. It can't be T.Y. Hilton, but it's not going to be zero. So somewhere in between, the Texans are going to have to just live with that and force that to be the situation with Amari Cooper. What do you think? Are the Texans going to take care of Amari Cooper? Throw a Amari Cooper stat prediction down in the comment section below. And on your way down to the comment section, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Check out the description in this video for a link to buy yourself a Houston football trucker hat. Incredible embroidery on the front. That's embroidery. That's not like a plastic logo or something. That's the embroidery, the great trucker hat in the back. Fits big heads like mine. Okay. Looks really good. Fits really well. Sits kind of high. Doesn't just crush your brain like some trucker hats do. You can buy that hat in the description down below. Check out our friends at Underdog Fantasy as well for all your fantasy action during the playoffs. And I appreciate you watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.